Let's talk a little bit about sort of your own training. And you mentioned some stuff about the rifle there. I sort of alluded to, our connection through that space. Again, if you know Mike and Fred, they're big into the distance carbine stuff. And I know that's what you've how you got introduced to them as well. But however, I want to talk about just sort of training. You mentioned a couple of things. One, that you live in New York. I live in California. I live behind the other wall. And there's some crazy places in the United States that are a little less free. New York and California happened to me when I was in New Jersey is wild. With regard to some of the limitations that they have there, as well as we're looking at states like Illinois now that are doing some really radical or crazy things. But the point of this is I just wonder what your upbringing, which you've talked about. I think you've alluded to. Just that this has been ingrained in you from a very young age. I wonder where things got introduced to you with regard to training with things outside of knives, swords, physical, or combatives, if you will, and they transition over into the firearms space, particularly kind of, again, and we can talk about like where you live and the limitations there and that kind of thing.
Sure. So we'll talk about two pieces there. So the first one being like how I kind of got fascinated by it. Honestly, man, I think like every other American kid, like, hey, Hollywood and like just, seeing all the cool guns and stuff like that. But also seeing that I was very analytical growing up. So I'm like, hey, this scary movie would have been stopped if this person was just able to defend themselves.
You mean the whole plot line goes away if the good guy has a gun and the bad guy is not the only guy with a gun. I love that. Like cinema just disappears if everybody's carrying. That's so funny.
Exactly. So like that was kind of like, hey, I kind of like self-realized that growing up. I've always been fascinated by the United States military growing up as a kid too. Me, like every other kid, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL growing up because, I just enamored them a lot. Quick aside there, if you want to keep this in here or not about that. So when I was growing up, I got bullied a lot. I wasn't as confident as I am now when I was a kid. And for me, seeing these like tier 1 dudes, tier 2 dudes come out of nowhere, different parts of the country, and just like develop this brotherhood and just go do good guy stuff around the world helped me a lot growing up as well. Like, hey, I don't really know how exactly my brain, put these two things together, but it holds very true for me to this day that like, hey, good men can come together and actually get good stuff done. And that kind of helped me get through a lot of bullying in school. I made a lot of good, not a lot of good friends, but a friend or two along the way that kind of helped with that. But, when I was in that high school period, but I got bullied a lot, especially living just north of New York City. A lot of people think that, in the state that I live in, or maybe the state that you live in, that there's not as much bullying or call it what it is, racism and stuff like that. And I'll be honest with you, man, I get more of it. Sometimes I feel like up here in the New York area than I do when we go to like where you and I go to Blakely.
Mm-hmm.
And like everybody there is super warm and inviting. And I've kind of noticed that more and more as I've gotten a little bit older and older, which is, not what everybody else says, but what I've experienced myself. So I had a lot of that growing up. So looking at a lot of these tier 1 guys, these tier 2 guys, I looked up to a lot of them. When I was a kid, me and my best friend in high school, we actually attended Extreme SEAL Experience way back when. God, that's a blast from the past, wow. Which was a thing in Virginia. Because again, we thought we were going to be Navy SEALs, right, in high school. But that was kind of my first introduction there, and I met a lot of really good people there from that. And that kind of really made sure that the seed was planted and then started growing. So from there, just starting to navigate my world or navigate myself in the firearms world was pretty interesting, especially living in this state. As soon as I turned, I think it was 18, or whenever I could finally own an AR, there was a law that came out like banning a lot of stuff with ARs. Like I think 3 or 4 weeks before I turned 18, and it crushed me.
Wow.
And it is what it is. So you adapt and you overcome. And like, yes, I'm not going to lie to you. It's super annoying having a 10-round magazine living in the state. And because of the job that I have, I got to stay within those confines. Mm-hmm. And that's totally fine. But again, talking about this community, which is kind of where we started talking about all this stuff today with SHOT Show. Dude, I can go to the range when I go to Blakely and be like, hey, fellow student, can I borrow a 30-round mag so my life doesn't suck for this class? Mm-hmm. And everybody's like, yeah, man, here 4. So like, it's the it's been a challenge to do a lot of that stuff. But at the same time, as long as you're patient and as long as you can lean on other people within this community, which I think we as a community of 2A folks need to do more,
Mhm.
I think you can kind of overcome some of those problems. Because I love where I live in terms of not the politics, but the the nature of where I live. I love hiking, doing a lot of outdoor stuff, and the job that I have. My coworkers, my partners there, truly are my family as well. So I don't want to leave them. So because of the flexibility that some of my community offers me in other states, it makes it doable. So when I come home and have to drive practice, yes, I have to amend a lot of things to stay within rules, and I'm sure you do as
Mhm.
well. But just trying to get the most out of what we have is kind of what I try and go for, and just being positive about it.
Yeah, I wonder how just this training and you trying to be positive about it, how it's received. You mentioned the term community, which can be a little bit of a loaded term, and I think used too broadly. What are we really talking about there? But at the same time, I wonder how you coming into the space, kind of where you are, what's the community like there? How are you received in the community there? With where you're coming from and your experience and the limitations that you guys have and so forth.
So that's a good question too. So I mean, I got my group of brothers and stuff like that we like hang out and we train a lot. We shoot as much as we can on areas that are very restricted in what we can do there, but it's something. And then we try, just continuously motivate each other. And, something that I really started learning, I got to give credit where credit is due with like Mike, Fred, Adam over from like Spirit of Systems and a couple other
Hmm.
people about like, hey man, it's not also just all the rifle stuff and the pistol stuff. There's also a physical health component to this too. And I'd never been super active and stuff like that, like I should have been as a kid. Um, I was outside a lot, but I just never worked out a lot. And as I got older, I kind of just got into this mindset of I just don't need to, I don't need to. And anybody in the space that is like, well, if you're not here, then why even bother? You're just like outcasted. And I'm just like, okay, then I'm outcasted. But then you have people that are encouraging and actually have good stuff out there. So like the three names that I mentioned, there's even more, I'm sure. But like those are just the first three that come to mind that are like, hey man, so yeah, it's really cool that you did this cool shooting drill, but you could do it faster if you shed a couple pounds,
Hmm.
if you're a little bit more mobile, a little
Hmm.
bit more agile.
Facts.
And I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Hmm.
And that actually kind of started like this weight loss journey for me over the last like year and a half or so. And I've been really happy with the results and I'm hoping to keep going forward. And now again, going back to that like group of peers that I have. So not only we're going to the range to do, pistol or rifle sessions, we're also trying to hit the gym or go for hikes or go for campouts and stuff like that and keep again that balance that is this modern, I think it should be this modern Minuteman. I know Fred talks about that a lot in America. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of where we kind of use our training time.